For decades now, housing costs have been rising while median wages have changed very little. Here in Johnson County, housing costs are the highest in the state of Iowa. What may be surprising, however, is the extent to which affordable housing is foundational for children's educational success, for family stability, physical health, and community connection. Recent major studies have shown that when a family moves from a low-income neighborhood to even a slightly better neighborhood, family stability and educational attainment are significantly improved for many years following the move. For instance, here in our own community, there are stories of how a family's move into affordable housing made all the difference. Ahead, we'll hear from some people who have experienced and witnessed this impact. Residents, educators, doctors, and community advocates who proudly support affordable housing in Johnson County.
We had 514 students who experienced homelessness in our district this school year. And so when we see a kid get into housing, into stable housing, we see a huge improvement in their academics.
I know if we lived in a trailer, we weren't going to get a school bus, like the community school bus. You have to live at least 3 miles away from the high school. With living like four houses down from City High, it's like we're able to walk to school. I'm able to, stay after school because I know I can walk right down, whereas to other kids, if they want to stay after school, they don't know if they have that ride or not, or they have to walk home, which is 2.99 miles, not 3 miles.
Well, it changed my life because it did give me the stability to be able to focus on other aspects of my life, such as my education and obtaining childcare and things that are really important other than housing. So after I did obtain affordable housing, I was able to attend school more regularly and focus on learning skills for my career that I wanted to have.
We had a family who came in through the refugee resettlement program with the Archdiocese of Dubuque. The kids came in not knowing any English at the beginning of the school year and living in a hotel, and then when they moved into housing and were coming to school every single day, all of a sudden they've taken off in school, and they've made 2 grade levels in progress this year, and that's what we really want to see. That's why we really want more affordable housing options.
Housing is so foundational that families often pay the rent first, leaving insufficient resources for food and medical care. Access to housing which requires 30% of family income or less results in fewer trips to the emergency room, reductions in asthma attacks, and fewer absences from school and work. In many cases, affordable housing works like a vaccine to improve health outcomes.
I've been working with this young person now for 7 years, and he had very significant attentional problems, was failing out of school, had understandably pretty significant anxiety because he wasn't sure where he was going to live day to day. And people were wondering why wasn't he doing well? Well, part of the reason was he couldn't adhere to his treatment. He couldn't take his medications because he never went home to the same place. And he and his family were able to get into affordable housing, and they've been there for several years now. He is an honor student, he's working part-time, and he's getting ready to graduate and has been accepted to college.
Just imagine if you lived in a place that there was, we'll say, low-income housing, and you didn't have proper ventilation, or you didn't have, or there was infestations, or whatever. As a kid that grew up in Chicago and dealt with all that and then moved to Iowa and did not have to deal with that, I had severe asthma as a kid. I don't have asthma really at all. Some of it was just natural growing out of it, but like I was in the emergency room 2 to 3 times a week. So to get to the point where I barely ever had to go, that's huge. Just imagine the stress that took off of my family in general.
So I talked about domestic violence earlier, and I think of a young lady whose family were able to get out of that environment. They were briefly in a domestic violence shelter, and then were able to get into a new town, in this case here in town, into affordable housing. She re-enrolled in school, initially was in an alternative school, because she was having a very difficult time adjusting, had been hospitalized several times. Stable housing, flash forward 6 months, and all of a sudden she's out of the alternative school, back in regular school, involved in about 900 extracurricular activities.
A number of studies have found that investments in affordable housing, far from being a drain on local resources, produce jobs and local sales and property tax revenue, among other fiscal benefits. Medium-sized cities with large universities, such as Ames and Iowa City, are among the most economically and racially segregated in our country. Many residents of Johnson County might be surprised to learn that the most frequent characteristics of those who access the services of the Iowa City Housing Authority are disabled and/or elderly, households without minors, white, one-person households, and working families. Affordable housing creates powerful, deeper social connections, which foster cultural and economic diversity and the opportunity for formerly marginalized citizens to contribute to the overall well-being of the community.
We have this thing in our head that like the best way to have community is all the neighbors know one another. Well, if you're constantly moving, I'm not about to invest time in getting to know my neighbor. And so when we have these opportunities to make these friendships and connections in our community with people from all different backgrounds, regardless of race, creed, income, etc., I mean, it just makes us a better community.
So I live on the north side, and I think it seems like to me, a perfect neighborhood. It's got a nice mix of rental, it's got a nice mix of different priced homes. You can walk everywhere. You can walk to school, walk to grocery store, you can walk everywhere. And so it's kind of like creating a little utopian neighborhood, I guess.
We have unbelievable data for years that having stability in a living environment is very important. We think of, the hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Got to have housing, food, shelter, food, water. It's the very bottom thing. But there's even more to that, and that is the person's sense of identity and community.
We used housing assistance to live here. And for us, it was like our first time actually living in a house. That allowed us to be able to have some place we could bring our friends home to that we weren't ashamed to bring them to. And so it's important. People don't think about that down on that like a very small scale, but it had huge impacts in my life about what I wanted for myself when I got older.
I worked with Habitat for Humanity on the Build in Hills this last summer. We get to meet and interact with all the families that are going to be moving into the houses, and so you get to know people and learn a lot about everybody and see the difference that it's going to make, and see that these people are kind of in the same situation that you've been, and that you can do things to give back to them and to your community, and maybe you can make the same difference for somebody else that has been made for you in your life.
There's a lot of people who impacted my life, and eventually, if I'm able to afford it, I'd like to, pay for someone's tuition or, give out a scholarship. I'm not, my mom, that's something my mom always showed us, is like, don't forget where you came from, and don't forget those who help you come where you are. So that's something that, I'm not just gonna, you just use people, you have to give back too.
Right now, our nation and our local communities are engaged in discussions about what it means to have healthy neighborhoods and vital communities, and what that might look like in the future. All of us need housing that is affordable, all of us participate in the housing market, and we can all influence the public policies that affect that market in an era when access to affordable housing is clearly foundational to anything we aspire to become.
Education is the key. If anyone has a chance to understand this and know the issues with it, and you can look at it, you just say, okay, this is something that needs to be implemented, and it's just a no-brainer, really.
I feel like it is our responsibility as a community to see to it that people have affordable options. The population I work with are all kids and parents, and so that's a pretty easy argument to say kids need a house.
I think it's easy to find things that you don't like about something when you're already skeptical about it, but if you try to look for the good things that have happened as a result of affordable housing in our community. There are lots of people like me out there that all they needed was one chance to make a difference, and once they get that chance, they're able to change their whole life. And so if you're able to give somebody that one chance, I think that it would be worth it any time.